Hello again and welcome to Dragonfire. So what I'm talking to you about today is how to equate a digital project to a construction project, which I hope will help you better understand the actual difficulties and technicalities involved in getting a digital project finished. So it's easy to understand how a non-technical and non-digitally aware person can get very frustrated with a digital construction project. They often take a lot longer than they were anticipated, and on numerous occasions they do run over budget. But there are a number of reasons for this, and that is because they're not as simple as is often assumed. Just because something looks simple on the front end of a website or an app or a piece of software, that doesn't necessarily mean that it actually is simple to produce. It's not the same process as walking into a car showroom and pointing at the car you want and saying, that's the model I want and this is the trim I want, and then giving you a to the penny price for that vehicle. It's a lot more like building a house, or perhaps if it's a particularly large project, it's a lot more like building a skyscraper or a very large scale construction project like an HS2, for example. And once you start thinking about it in those terms, it's a lot easier for you to understand how one of these projects is best managed. So let's go somewhere in the middle and imagine that what you're building is an office block. So let's imagine for the time being that you have already got the planning permission and the land to actually go and build this thing. Before you ever have a builder come along, the first thing you've got to do is employ an architect to design the building. And as you can appreciate, this is a lot more involved than simply sketching what the outside is going to look like. The architect has to plan the layout, the size, the scale, the footprint, the entrances, the exits, the outside aesthetics, everything on the building that you can possibly imagine, and that's just on the outside. When you get to the inside, you're looking at the number of rooms, the corridors, the purposes of the rooms, the where plumbing's going to run, where electricity is going to come in, where staircases are going to be, where lifts are going to be, and just about every other element of how that building is going to come together all need to be considered. And all of this happens long before you ever have a builder come along to take a look at the actual build costs of the building. So the same is true for any digital project. The same process has to happen. You need to plan it, you need to think about it, you need to understand where every single element is going to be, how it's going to sit, how it's going to work, what it's going to look like. All of that needs to be decided before anybody can give you a realistic expectation of how much it's going to cost to build. Continuing with the construction theme, the next step is of course materials. So when you've actually decided how you want your building to look, how it's going to lay out, and what's going to be in it, you've then got to decide what you're actually going to make it out of. Is it going to be a steel frame building? Are you going to build it out of brick? Is it going to be built out of reinforced concrete? Are you going to have interior stud walls? Are you going to have solid interior walls? Are you going to have suspended ceilings? Are you going to have a plush marble reception area? Are you going to have large glass fronted parts of the building? Are you going to have cladding on the outside? All of these things must be considered before you actually go ahead and again get costings. And the same again is true for digital. In digital, when you're talking about materials, what you're referring to is the code. You're referring to the language that it's going to be built in, the different code languages that might need to be brought together to make it viable and make it work for you. So again, you've got to make sure these things are understood before you ever get started. So the utilities of your building are the next step. Now that is your electrics, your plumbing, your gas, your heating, your lighting, how you're going to have road links in and out, how you're going to have telecoms links in and out of the building. All of these things must be considered, and they cannot be left out and they cannot be left to chance, because you've got to get that there so that you can open the doors of your building on the first day and actually have it working. And the same is true for digital. On digital, the utilities are your IT. It's your underlying infrastructure that actually keeps it all working and keeps it all running. That's your hosting, that's your bandwidth on the hosting. That's how your security and things like your SSL certificates and your other security measures that are in place to make sure that your website functions and works correctly. So let's say you've done all this stuff with your building, you can then have a builder come along, take a look, and provide you an estimate. That estimate will be the cost and the approximate time frame that it's going to take to build it. Now, you don't have to have ever been involved in a construction project yourself to know that you've probably never heard of one that has actually been delivered on time and on budget. And that is because there are always unforeseen issues. There are always things that will crop up during the course of a build and during the course of developing something that will inevitably cause delays. So if you were having your office block built and halfway through the process you decided, I want to build an extra wing on the building. Now that's of course doable, assuming of course that you don't have to knock down large parts of it in order to do that. But if you were to do that, the first thing you'd have to do is go back to your architects, get them to design the new wing you wanted to add on. They would then have to make all the plans for how they're going to get that new area of the building to work and function and link in with the rest of the building. And then you could have the builder come and take a look at that to give you an estimate on adding that part to it. And the same again is true for digital. In digital, your developer is working on a complex ground up project. They are working on something that they are building often from scratch, often from the very base point of zero code at all up to a finished product. Now, in often cases as well, that developer is building something they've never physically developed before. They probably know the principles of how to develop something like it, but they may be working on something that to them is brand new. And the reason is that most developers have developed lots of things, but there is often intricacies and individual things specific to individual projects that are different and therefore require a different approach. And a developer is constantly having to test, retest, build and rebuild these elements to make sure that they work for you. And the same would be true for a builder. If you had a builder do a job for you who had never built this particular thing in this particular way before, they'd know the principles of how to do it, but there would be some trial and error involved, and it would take them some time. And there's a chance that they might have to stop, go back and do some of it again. And the same applies in development. And again, using the same analogy, if you ask for something brand new halfway through the development process, that does have to go back to the planning stage. There is going to need to be some rethinking and some reimagining done in order to fit that into your project, or to change the very basis of something that was there to begin with. You've either got to rip something out, or you've got to wipe out some plans and you've got to put some new ones over them. So all of these things have to be done. There's always going to be snags. There will always be bugs. There will always be things that need to be repaired, need to be re-looked at and figured out during the development process of any kind of project. So always do bear that in mind whenever you're commissioning anyone, because if a developer is prepared to give you a fixed price to say this is exactly how much it will cost to develop this thing, unless they are developing something that is pretty run-of-the-mill in terms of nothing there they have never developed before. If that is the case, then they should probably be able to give you a pretty accurate idea of cost, price and time frame. However, if it's something more complex, if it's an app, if it's a piece of software, if it's a portal, if it's a web project that's got login areas and parts of it, and there are some interesting new different functionalities in there, no developer who knows what they're doing is ever going to give you an absolutely fixed price, because they will not be able to guarantee they can do that. And if they are going to give you a fixed price, then they probably don't know how they're going to do it, or the likelihood is they won't finish it within that fixed price. They're going to lose out, or they're going to come back to you halfway through and say, we need more money now. And that is always going to cause problems. So bear in mind, whenever you're commissioning anyone for one of these sort of projects, you've got to be aware of the actual stuff that's going on, the things that are happening to make this project work for you. And the better you can understand these things, and the easier it is for you to create the idea in your head that this is very similar to building a house, then it gives you a much clearer idea of the complexities involved, the time frames involved, and sometimes, yes, the costs involved as well are going to be comparable. So once you're aware of these things, it makes it a lot easier for you to understand how these projects work, and therefore how you need to approach them and need to have them in your head. I hope this has been helpful. If you'd like any more information, or you'd like to speak to us any more about anything else that we can offer to you, or any help we can be, then please do get in touch, and I'm more than happy to talk to you.